20, and we've been going through this series titled Just Jesus. And we saw some really incredible interactions between Jesus and the religious people. And Jesus broke some microphones as he continued to drop the mic time and time again. And then Greg took us through this incredible messianic song that talked about who Jesus was. Well, here we're going to begin to see a transition between Jesus's interaction primarily with the religious elite, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the scribes, and the teachers of the law. And we're going to see him begin to engage again with his disciples. And this is so special because everything that's been going on between Jesus and the religious elite, he now is going to use that in order to teach his disciples back then, but so especially teach you and I today and this morning. Luke chapter 20, starting in verse 45. And if you want to give a title to this morning's lesson, the title is, What Do You Value? What do you value? Luke 20, verse 45. While all the people were listening, Jesus turned and said to his disciples, he has this interaction with everybody, and then he turns and he's talking to his disciples, but there must be some other people within ear's length. Verse 46, beware or give careful consideration of the teachers of the law. So everything that has just gone on between Jesus and these religious people, Jesus turns to his disciples. He says, okay, I want you to consider carefully what's going on in these people's lives. They like to walk around in flowing robes and love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at the banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely. As Jesus looked up, he saw the rich putting their gifts into the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins. Truly, I tell you, Jesus said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. And it's funny because oftentimes when you and I read our Bibles, it's got these little headings, right? And or the numbers, the chapter numbers. And oftentimes when we read it, we use that as stopping points. And many times it's a good stopping point because there's a change in scene, there's a change in focus. But here, I really do believe that this heading and this change in chapter actually hurts us as readers because oftentimes we separate these two situations from each other when actually they fit really beautifully together. And I'll explain what I mean in a moment. But Jesus, after this crazy interaction with all the people, he turns to his disciples. He says, okay, I want you to consider really carefully what's going on with religious leaders. And I think actually looking to you and me, he says, hey, Donnell, hey, Brittany, hey, Sean, hey, Barb, hey, Corey, hey, Darylyn, I need you to consider very, very carefully what just happened between me and these religious leaders. Why? Well, I actually think it's because you and I have such a grave temptation to align ourselves with these religious leaders. It's funny, I was having a quiet time with my wife and my parents this morning, and we discussed how easy it is to look down our nose at some of the people in the Bible, right? We look down our nose at King Saul, and we're like, Saul, you're the first king. How did you blow it this bad? All you had to do was obey God. Or we look down our nose at Judas. We're like, Judas, you had Jesus. You saw the miracles. How could you trade Jesus for just a couple things of silver? Or, and actually probably most frequently for me, it's the religious leaders. I'm like, gosh, you guys read the Bible. You potentially had the first 5 books of the Old Testament memorized. And yet you missed so much of what God was trying to communicate to you. How could this be? But what's so cool is Jesus takes the situation and he flips it. He says, hey, disciples of mine, be really, really careful because you too could fall into this same trap. I love that warning, especially for me today, because who am I? I'm a scribe. I'm a teacher of the law. Hopefully, I'm not the ones that Jesus is out persecuting or rejecting or denouncing. But that's my profession. That's what I get paid to do. Is I'm a minister uh, by trade, I guess, if that's a trade. but but that so easily can be me. And so Jesus looking at me, he's like, man, Jimmy, be really, really careful. But what is it that Jesus wants his disciples to be careful about? What is it that Jesus wants you to be careful about? What is it that Jesus wants me to be careful about? He wants us to be really, really careful about what we value, what we hold in high esteem. I remember almost like it was yesterday, the day I got married to my wife. And it is the second greatest day of my entire life. The first day was the day I got baptized for the forgiveness of my sins. The second day was the day I get married to Kat. I love that day for so many reasons. The people that were with me, the memories, the laughs. But I remember when the doors opened and Catherine came into the aisle, and I was captivated. There's a video out there somewhere. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. But as I was staring at her, I had tears coming down my eyes because I was so overwhelmed with joy over the fact that this woman committed to marrying me. Like she just had a thing over her eyes for the 2 years that she knew me, and it got wiped away after we got married. But I remember that day we got married, and the guy who married us, his name's Sean Kirkland. He's like a second father to me. He studied the Bible with me. He baptized me. He really has done so much for me and my wife, actually. But during our wedding, he joked on me a lot, and he made fun of me a lot. And he said, Catherine, you got to be careful. Jimmy has a favorite piece of furniture, and he loves to have this piece of furniture at every corner of his room. And he goes on to say it's a mirror. And he says Jimmy loves looking at himself in the mirror. He loves looking at his biceps, all these different things. He went on and on and on. And part of it's a joke. Part of it probably is true. But there's another part of it that is actually really, really exposing for me. The thing I value probably more than anything else is my image. My image, my reputation, my status, what people think about me. It's so inherently inside of me, right? We've talked about it. You make a post on social media, you go back and look at it. The very first thing you look at is how many people liked it, loved it, laughed at it, and how many people commented on it. And then you probably compare it to your other friends, right? And maybe we don't all do that, but I'm sure many of you can relate with me. We really do care a lot about our image. Just the other day, I was actually just yesterday, I was out for a run, and I found myself when I was around people, I would run faster than when I was alone because I cared if they thought I was a good runner. And I'm a terrible runner. I run at like an 11-mile-an-hour pace. Nobody cares about some guy running it. But the moment I came up on people, I'd start running a little bit faster because I care about what people think about me. And there's other things that I value. I love my cup of Joe in the morning with a splash of cream. I love sitting by this fire at my parents' house. I love having family time with my wife. I really do value the Cleveland Browns. I'm going to watch them later today. There's things that I value that aren't so inherently bad, but I think the thing that's scary is that Jesus is revealing amongst these Pharisees and these religious leaders, and he's challenging me on is how much I value my image, my reputation, my status, and ultimately how much I just value myself, how much I care about myself, and how selfish I can be. And so Jesus is calling them out, and they're doing these different things that lift up their status, but it's also at the detriment of another type of people, isn't it? Down in verse 47, he says, you guys do all these things to raise yourselves up. Verse 47, these scribes, it says they devour widows, the widows' houses, and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely. These religious people who have a portion of the truth that aren't using it for the betterment of others, but are simply using it for the elevation of self. And we can hear this. We're like, oh, God forbid, I would never do that. Well, guess what? Jesus is talking to you and he's talking to me. He's actually saying, no, you need to beware, because you too are going to be tempted by this desire to use what you've been given to elevate self rather than to elevate others. And I mentioned that these two scriptures are tied beautifully together, and it is this idea of the widow. Jesus calls them out specifically for what? Not taking care of the widows and devouring the widows. And it's debated amongst theologians what that means. Was it their property? Was it their house? Was it their livelihood? Was it taking advantage of them? And because they were without a husband? We really don't know, but we know that they weren't taking care of them, though God has a special place in his heart for them. Well, look at the beginning of verse 21. Jesus takes their attention from the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes, and he shifts it towards who? Well, towards a widow. So he's talking about the religious people not taking care of widows, and then he shifts it towards a real life widow. And what's this widow doing? This widow is showing what she values the most. She takes all she has, and who does she give it to? Yeah, you're right, to God. She takes these 2 copper coins and she gives it to God. All she has. She doesn't use it to promote self or elevate self. She uses it to elevate her God. The things that have been given to you, what do you use them for? Do you use them for promotion of self, or do you use them for the promotion of others? Really easily, your finances. And actually, this was really mind-boggling for me as I wrestled with this passage, because we can assume that in this woman's heart, she was giving to God. But who directly is receiving these funds? Well, it's the leaders of the temple. It's the religious elite. It's the scribes, the very people who are devouring her, who are uh, casting this incredible injustice on her. She is giving not in her heart to them, she's giving in her heart to God, but they're the ones who are directly receiving it. And I don't know about you, but if I'm her, I'm like, I'm not giving it to this temple. But in her mind, she can't fathom not doing it, because she values her God that much. She trusts her God that much. And so one of the questions we're going to discuss in our breakout rooms here in a moment is what you are doing on your free time. What does that reveal about what you value the most? And actually, maybe a better question is, when no one else is around, what are you doing? And then what does that reveal about what you value the most? You see, when I was running by myself, I was unwilling to push myself as much because, well, I really didn't want to run at all yesterday, and I just kind of forced myself to. But when people started to see me, I started to go faster because I valued their opinion of me more than I valued my gain in physical fitness or my gain in my vascular endurance. But what are you doing when there's nobody else around? Are you quickly going to some sort of sin? Are you using it for the promotion of self via Netflix, video games, or Hulu, or whatever it is? Or are you using that for the betterment of God and the betterment of others? Many of us actually have more time right now than we did pre-COVID, right? Maybe our work schedule isn't as busy. Maybe that's not completely true. I know some of you have kids, and life is even busier and harder and crazier. But many of us, we actually do have more free time. We don't have to drive. Well, bowling. I was going to say 30 minutes, but very few of us drive 30 minutes to go anywhere in Bowling Green. Uh, but we don't have to spend that time in the car. We do get to be at home, but am I using that time to bring greater honor and glory and love to my Father, or am I using it to promote self? Am I using it to benefit others, or am I using it to benefit self? I was so grateful for the text last week in the way that it challenged me in preparation for this week, because I know in my sinful nature, I'm so inclined to just use my free time for myself. But one of the things I've been so grateful for this past week is some of the time I've gotten on the phone with my brothers. I really did cherish some of the prayer time and the talk time that I got to have with Willie T, Donnell, and Aaron. And if it wasn't for the text last week, oh my goodness, I totally would have been using this whole week just for myself. But even with Christmas coming up, right, I struggle mightily with what am I getting for Christmas? And you're like, oh my gosh, the dude's 29. Why does he still care about what he's getting for Christmas? Because I'm sinful and I'm jacked up. But I really do need to shift my focus and think, okay, how can I use what I've been given to benefit others? Because church, the world needs help, doesn't it? It really, really does. This week alone, I've heard of 3 people that have some sort of relationship with my family committing suicide. 3. 2 of which are younger than me. And I think about that. And I think about how much our world is desperately in need for Jesus. It's like, oh my gosh, how can I not help but go and share Jesus with the world around me? Is it going to look different? Yeah. I can't go and hug somebody. I can't go get coffee with them at Spencer's or Q, or, and yeah, it's going to look different, but I can be creative. I can use technology and I can use it to engage and love people better. But what I think is so special is we are able to compare and contrast the Pharisees and the religious people to this widow. Then we get to shift and we get to take our eyes to Jesus. Go ahead and turn with me over to Philippians chapter 2. We've talked about what the Pharisees and the Sadducees valued. We've talked about what the widow valued, but I think it's really important that we look and we see what Jesus himself values. And this will be the passage that hopefully you can use in your preparation for communion after the discussion groups. Philippians chapter 2, and I think actually some of us had this memorized back when we were going through the book of Philippians, starting in verse 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, what? Value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ. So we're about to see what Jesus himself values. Jesus, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Everything that he had been given from his Father, he did not view it as something to be used for himself. Verse 7, rather he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant and being made in human likeness, and being found in an appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. What does Jesus value? Jesus values you. He loves you. He cherishes you. He wants you, and he desires you. He does if you're a widow. who has very little financial support and very little to offer, guess what? He values you. He desires you. If you're a Pharisee, a Sadducee, or a scribe, guess what? He values you too. We have to ask ourselves, why is Jesus spending so much time engaging with these religious people? Well, it's because he loves them. He loves them enough not to leave them in their mutt, in their mire, in their filth. Rather, he's engaging with them, risking his life, risking his popularity, risking his reputation. Why? Because he loves them and he wants them to experience the grace, the glory, the mercy, and the life to the full that only comes in God. Jesus values you. He values me. He values us. And he proved it on the cross. We know in the Garden of Gethsemane, he did not want to die the way that he died. But he did so because he wants you, he loves you, and he desires you. And so we're going to break up into our breakout groups now, and Josh is going to go ahead and handle all of that. And we're going to discuss two questions in these groups, and I'll include them in the chat once we break up in the groups. Josh, don't if you can, don't put me in a group so I can get out some information. The first question is, when no one else is around, when no one else is looking, what does your life say about what you value the most? And again, I'll put that in the chat. And then the second question is, how can you learn to love, value, and serve Jesus more than anything else?
We, the Bowling Green Church, are a diverse family devoted to the Bible on a mission to love God, love people, and see this world changed for Jesus. If that's something you're interested in joining and becoming a part of, please leave a comment below or connect with us on our website or on Facebook. Our website is thebowlinggreen.church. We'd love to connect with you and passionately pursue Jesus together. Thank you so much for worshiping with us, and we look forward to meeting you.